Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Ernesto Bird, and I'm the publisher of New Hampshire Business Review. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our conversation today, Building an Inclusive and Diverse Workspace, where we will be providing tips on how to create an inclusive workplace environment that benefits everyone. The conversation today is presented by the Diversity Workforce Coalition and it's sponsored by Sulloway and Hollis, PLLC, Counselors at Law. And I'll introduce all of our panelists in a minute, but I first want to introduce one of our panelists in particular, Jermaine Moore, founder of the Mars Hill Group, because he is going to speak on behalf of our presenting sponsor, the Diversity Workforce Coalition. So Jermaine, please.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so pleased to be a part of this panel discussion today and pleased to be a part of the Diversity Workforce Coalition. We're a member-based organization that really seeks to connect and assist employers and members of the community in diversity and inclusion matters. And we do that through training and education and enhanced networking opportunities and providing resources to help companies really do better in this area. So I'm just very pleased to be here and looking forward to the panel discussion today.
All right, thank you so much, Jermaine. Our other panelists today, we also have with us, unfortunately not by video for some technical reasons, but we do have Tina M. Sharby on the line. She is the Chief Human Resources Officer for Easter Seals. Tina, hello.
Good morning. I'm, like Jermaine, very pleased to be here with you all this morning. I currently work at Easter Seals, but have a little over 25 years of experience in the HR field and work very closely with inclusive environments, diverse workplaces. That's a top of mind for our organization. So this is a really great opportunity for all of us to share ideas.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And then we have, last but definitely not least, Elizabeth Chick, HR coordinator for Vapotherm Incorporated. Elizabeth, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yes, I am the HR coordinator for Vapotherm. We're a medical device company in Exeter. So we manufacture a device to help patients who are in respiratory distress. So 2020 has been a year for us so far. There's a lot going on, but I'm really excited to be able to be here with everyone and talk about the different diversity and inclusion efforts that we have at Vapotherm and to learn from everyone else as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here. So we will not delay. We'll jump right into the conversation here. I think that everybody who's on this call, both presenters and the folks who have dialed in, is aware that diversity has been a big part of the national conversation over the past couple months, really over the past couple of years, and longer, but certainly over the past couple months. It's been a very important part of the national conversation, and I think a lot of businesses are left with questions on how to address this in a sensitive way, in a realistic way, and maybe in a way that makes sense for their business. You know, how does diversity benefit a business? And so we have some great people to talk about all of those issues. I also want to point out that this is an interactive conversation. So if you're listening, feel free to add questions in the question section, and we will direct those questions to the panelists. And so please add those as we go along, and we'll make sure to get those in. So I think coming out of the gate, I wanted to start with a question, really, which is, you know, I think a good defining of terms can be helpful. So how do you guys look at diversity? How do you define it? You know, because I think it's inclusive of a lot of different elements of people's lives. You know, we may talk about diversity really specifically right now in this big national conversation that we're having. I think a lot of people think specifically of race, but there are other elements as well. So whoever wants to jump in first, please do.
Oh, I would love to jump in. I think that what you just said is absolutely right on. I think the majority of people, when you ask about diversity, you get the response of it being race and ethnicity. And I view diversity as understanding that each individual is different and unique. And that would include race, culture, gender, different abilities, socioeconomic, education. So I see it as a much broader definition, if you will.
Yeah, I would agree. I think obviously the national discussion has been focused on race, and I think appropriately so, given the current environments and some of the things that racial discord we've seen around the country. I think the focus is fine to be there for a little while. I think there's a lot of work to be done there. But like Tina, I do believe that it is inclusive of many different diversity, so to speak. So whether it is sexual identity, gender, age, social economic class is something that we talk about as well, culture, ethnicity, all of those things are included when we think about diversity and inclusion as well. So I really try to caution, companies that I work with I think it's okay to be very specific when you're talking about diversity. I try to caution against diversity of thought. I mean, the idea is diversity will bring in diversity of thought. But if you have a team, for instance, full of middle-aged white men, although they have different personalities and they may think differently, I wouldn't say that that is a diverse group, right? So there's certain differences that diversity is focused on. I think that's important to just be very clear about.
Yes. Elizabeth, anything?
No, I think that they both covered it pretty well. I think, like Jermaine said, right now our kind of focus for diversity is from a racial perspective. And I think for right now, that's a good piece to focus on. And I think we've seen it open up doors for other diverse collects of people, and it shed light on them and just kind of continue to open that. And I think that that's really cool to see, and encourage people to think broader than what they originally had. And that's the whole point, is just to open up those mindsets and say, who aren't we thinking about? Where can we tap into further?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, and that, hearing that and hearing, I think the answer to all of that, it raises the second sort of foundational question here for the discussion, which is, okay, so that's what diversity is. Why should businesses care about it? What's the business case for diversity? And I think, Jermaine, you already mentioned, a starting place for that in terms of a diversity of thought can be useful to teams. But perhaps each of you could talk about, like, what's the business case from your perspective in your role right now for diversity?
We were just talking about this with our leadership team, and the common response is that it's just the right thing to do, that everyone has a right to be employed, to earn a living wage, be treated with dignity and respect. I'm sure that we could talk all day about the many studies that are out there that show that, if you leverage talent through a diverse workforce, that the organization has higher revenue, has increased innovation and knowledge. But really, you want a workforce that is reflective of who you are, who your customers are, who your community is. And when you have that and it's inclusive and equitable, then you're able to attract and maintain staff. And at the end of the day, that's what you need. You need staff to be able to run your organization.
Yeah.
I think that retention point is a really big one, and I think, Jermaine, you were about to probably dive in on that.
Yeah, I was going to agree with Tina. I think it is the right thing to do. I think a lot of companies are feeling this moral imperative to put in the work and invest their resources and time to get this right. But realistically, that may not move the needle for everyone. I'm assuming people that are dialed in today, that resonates with them. But for this work to stick, you really do have to make a business case of why we want to invest in this particular area. And like Tina mentioned, there's a ton of research out there. McKinsey & Company did 3 fairly large studies really connecting the dots between diversity and business outcomes. And I think if you're leading this effort, you really have to be able to speak to the business outcomes and why this makes sense in a business case, from a business perspective, along with it being the right thing to do, along with it being the socially responsible thing to do. But not everybody, that message is not going to resonate with everybody. So I think you have to be very clear about how this affects the business as well. So I think you do them both. I don't think it's one or the other. I think the efforts that tend to be maintained and sustained over time, they're having business conversations about why this makes absolute perfect sense. And from a retention standpoint, I agree. I think you're going to find, if you are in this war for talent, which we all are, and finding the best and the brightest, that people care about these issues. So not only is it a retention issue, keeping the folks that you have, but it's an attraction issue. How are you going to get the best and the brightest into your organization? These are some of the questions they're going to ask you about your D&I initiatives. What have you done? What was your response? In light of the George Floyd murder or protest there. So I think it's very important to think about it from many different angles as you're considering this work.
Yes, and you just used an acronym. You said D&I initiative. So for folks who don't know what that is.
So D&I is diversity and inclusion. Sometimes you'll see DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but that's typically what that means.
Yeah. Okay. And Elizabeth, what do you see, in your role in terms of, we just talked about retention, and do you see that playing out in terms of having a strong diversity policy, creating a sense of belonging or inclusion that would keep people?
Yeah, for sure. I think everyone wants to share their opinion, whether it may be the general opinion or not. They want to have that outlet to share it. So by fostering that culture and encouraging people to share their opinion, that is something that we want our teams to feel. And so by just kind of putting that into our culture to begin with, it definitely helps encourage them to be a part of it and encourage their networks and their communities to want to be a part of our teams too. So we've kind of used that as our recruiting tool almost to tap into those networks and then expand our teams from there. I think we're all about, I think in general, that continuous improvement. And if you don't have those differencing opinions, how do you improve and how do you challenge each other and continue to grow that system?
Now, do you guys do do you keep track of metrics in terms of, things like retention over time based on when you started these initiatives and that sort of thing?
Well, we've always had them as initiatives, so it's not something that we've newly implemented, that it's always been part of us. So from that perspective, no, but we do try to challenge what we have in place and how can we improve it and get everyone involved. So as you have new people join, that kind of inevitably happens.
So most companies, I think, well, I don't know if I can say most, but many companies don't have those initiatives in place right now. So I think the next question is, where did they begin? Jermaine, you had, we talked about this a bit yesterday in terms of when we had our preparation call. And so maybe you want to take that one first, and then we'll go to Elizabeth and Tina as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's the question that I'm hearing a lot of companies ask. Well, how do we start this work? We want to do this work. Our heart is here. We have the right intention, but where do we begin? And so there's a couple things I think companies should consider. One is taking a real assessment of where they are today, right? So this is a journey. This is a long-term investment that you want to make. So in order to figure out if these initiatives are working, if we're doing the right things, we have to really take a hard look at where we are. And we may not like what we see, but that's okay, right? But we want to be realistic. This is our point A. And then and after that assessment, get a sense for where you're trying to go, what's your vision for not only your company, but some of these D&I initiatives. And then you put a strategic plan together. And I think having goals, having metrics, KPIs, so you can diagnose and check in. How are we doing here? Do we need to change direction or scope? And then adjust along the way, I think is very, very important. But beginning with an assessment of where you are. And I would really encourage you organizations to tap their employees. So don't let this be an exercise of just with your leadership or just with your HR group. It's more than numbers, right? Although those numbers are very important, but you want to understand what the experience is like for your employees and your organization. So tap them. They are the ones on the front line. They experience it every day, and that'll give you a more well-rounded idea of where you're beginning, so you know where you need to go, and you're getting employee buy-in along the way. So I think it's important to do that initial assessment, include all of your employees, or as many employees as you can in that assessment. That's a great place to start. And also think you should be very explicit about what you're trying to do. So say what your goals are, build some accountability into this work that you're doing. And I think that's going to be that's important as well.
What does that initial assessment look like on a practical level? Like, does it have to be, you know, a 30-page scoping document, or what is it?
I'll share my experience. So I've seen it in many different ways that companies attack this. Sometimes it's as simple as hosting a roundtable, inviting your employees in to say, how are you doing? What are you feeling? What are some of the barriers in the way of you feeling included in our organization? And create a space safe enough for your employees to speak up, and identify some of those major themes that you're hearing along the way that the company can address and tackle. So it could be as simple as that. Sometimes it's surveys, anonymous surveys work. So many different ways to gather that information, but it doesn't have to be a 30-page report to get a sense for where you are. But curious, Tina and Elizabeth, what you've seen. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, I was going to say, Tina, what's the view from Easter Seals on this?
Well, I would just say, generally speaking, that I think that, yeah, this is definitely top of mind. I've never seen so many recruitment ads for DE&I officers and such. And I would caution and do what Jermaine has suggested, is that, you know, you get an assessment, see where you are. I think that we've discussed taking small steps, making sure that we take the time to understand others that are different from ourselves, and really, more importantly, not being afraid to ask someone who is different from yourself to explain some of the biases that they might have experienced, and ask them, you know, what would make them feel more included in this environment. I think that we have to focus on creating a feeling of belonging, and a sense that the organizational culture is open to hear new and different perspectives. So I think that the assessment is a great place to start, and then really opening up the lines of communication with staff at all levels throughout the organization.
So I think you know, one thing that jumps out of that recommendation is that asking the question of people, you know, what biases do you feel like you're experiencing, and that sort of thing, and it seems like the kind of question that you know, very well-meaning people might feel challenged about asking, like, or feel insecure or fearful about asking, in that they might ask it in a way that's offensive, or that may feel like it's singling somebody out. What are some of your thoughts on how you approach that? And then again, is this also something that is built out of training or reading or understanding communication strategy?
You have a really great point. There is a fine line on how you can go about asking these types of questions. But if you are genuine in your approach and explaining that you want to understand that, you know, that everybody has biases, we all do, and that you're trying to work with our staff to have a more inclusive environment. I think that the honest and open conversation would be a good one to have. I know that Elizabeth has some really cool groups. I don't know if you call them groups still. I wonder if you could speak to how those groups get formed, because I know that they're very diverse.
Yeah, so we at Vapotherm actually have a diversity and inclusion roundtable that typically we host every other month, and that is led by a group of employees, and they come up with topics and they put the roundtable discussion together. So it doesn't feel like it's from your peers. It's not being kind of forced down. It has that more open approach to it. And those are held bi-monthly, and it's just a time for everyone to come together and talk about hard topics and have those open conversations. And I think, like Tina said, it's all about how you approach it. And one way that we have tried to kind of foster that culture to support those conversations is by having as one of our guiding principles, clear, direct, and respectful communication with everyone. So from the beginning, when someone joins the Vapotherm team, no matter your level or whichever team you're on, it's being instituted that this is our culture, and we expect you to have that clear and direct, respectful communication with anyone that you're talking to, so that they know this is the expectation, and there's no question around it. And one way that we've encouraged that is by trainings. When people come on board, is to have those crucial conversation trainings, where it's a 2-day course that they're in. And again, no matter your role, your team, your level, you're a part of this training. So I think tying all those together is definitely really important, to stress this isn't something we're doing right now. This is us, and we're going to continue doing this. And especially now, we're going to highlight it because it's such an important time for all of us to share our opinions and hear them. And even though it may not be the general opinion shared by everyone, we still want you to feel that you can share that, and have that conversation. We actually held a D&I roundtable. It was right around George Floyd and when everything was happening, and we held it both virtual and on site, and had people come together and share their different opinions and how they felt about everything and how they were navigating it, especially through a global pandemic. Like, what is going on? We want to hear from you. We want to know how this impacts you and affects you and how you're going through everything. And we had people share different opinions, but knowing that that was part of our culture, I think encouraged people to share those opinions and for them to be received in not a harsh way, that it just helps continue that conversation.
So you mentioned, I just want to pull this out because it went by a little quickly.
Oh, sorry.
No. Your entire statement was excellent. What went by quickly was you just mentioned crucial conversations, and
Yeah.
I know that the audience that we have knows that that's the name of a book, and also the name of a training seminar that Jermaine holds. And so maybe one of you guys want to just give us the 30-second sketch of what that is, because I ordered this book after you guys talked about it.
Oh, did you? Yeah, so
It's a great book.
It is. So we host for anyone that's joining the Vapotherm team, again, regardless of your level or team, crucial conversations training. So I can speak to it from a Vapotherm perspective, and then I'll let Jermaine jump in on kind of what that course fully entails. So it's a 2-day course that he leads, and it just kind of, again, fosters how you have those crucial conversations and how we want them to be a part of our culture. So this is how you go about that. Those conversations are hard, and we don't expect everyone to be good at them. So to have that training is definitely key to that. I know from an HR perspective, those conversations are happening all the time right now. So I greatly appreciate that training, and know that I have those tools to be able to go forward. And I know I've received feedback that even outside of work, people have used that training, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, I think it's great training, and it just kudos to Vapotherm and their culture. I think what I'm seeing is that companies who have set the right groundwork with their existing culture find incorporating D&I and tough, courageous conversation, crucial conversation a little bit easier, right? So if you're already a culture where you welcome difference of opinion, where you welcome people to speak up and share their thoughts, then the D&I focus isn't a hard focus to have, right? But if you're a culture that people are afraid to speak up about any issue, then they're going to really have trouble speaking up about, some of their D&I issues. So I just appreciate the work that Vapotherm has done to make this focus easy for them. They've always been about, respectful communication and people's perspective being important and heard. So that's very important. But Crucial Conversations is a great place to start too, because, and I've called it courageous conversations, is a little bit of shift when working with employers, because people are fearful to have these types of conversations. They don't want to say the wrong thing, and because they don't want to say the wrong thing and offend a coworker, they tend to freeze and not say anything. But then that silence also speaks volumes to your people. I think leaders are learning that lesson over the last few months. They haven't said anything, and their employees are like, why haven't you spoken up? Why haven't you taken a stand against some of these things? So some of this is skill-based training, right? So we may want to do this work, but we just don't know how. How do I have this conversation with my coworker who says something that may be offensive to either to anyone within the organization? How do I create a space safe enough where we can have really intelligent discourse, about some of these very sensitive issues? And Crucial Conversations is a way to help do that.
You bring up a great point there. In addition to thank you for sort of describing that Crucial Conversations concept, but you just mentioned at the end, in terms of leadership addressing these issues, right? And Elizabeth, you had said that you guys held meetings while the George Floyd protests were going on, and I think that there were a lot of leaders, who felt like they should be saying something, but didn't necessarily know, like, where's the line there? Because it's, these are complicated situations. And I saw situations where things would blow up on Instagram where well-meaning people were trying to say the right things, and they ended up saying completely awful things or mistaken things, or it felt a bit like, like social media had become a minefield, even for people who thought they were aware, or, and so how do you recommend that leaders speak to those issues that are so incredibly complicated, and that the language is continually evolving around? And maybe Tina, you want to take a stab at this, because I don't want you to become out of sight, out of mind. I wish you were on video with us.
Oh, no, that's okay. I appreciate that. I think it is a very difficult issue to address, because you're right, well-meaning and intentioned message could be taken the wrong way. So you do need to be careful, and I would say socialize within your organization if you're going to put a statement out, or if you're going to have group meetings. I think this goes back, though, to what Jermaine and Elizabeth were saying. If you have that culture where you can have those open, honest, crucial conversations, then it really makes everything so much easier, because then you just have the roundtable discussions, because this is normal for you to have the roundtable discussions. I think that organizations that don't have roundtable discussions or meetings like that on a regular basis struggle a little bit more with how to address diversity issues that occur outside the workplace.
Tina, what would you recommend for organizations that don't have those right now? This is sort of bringing us back to how do we get started. And we did have a question from one of our listeners, Marianne, who points out, our company is very small. We only have a dozen employees. How do we go about starting this?
Well, to me, that's pretty easy because that's a small company. You have 12 employees, so you have time to talk with the employees, and easy to ask opinions and go over whatever information it is that you're trying to obtain. When you have a larger organization or one that is in multi-states or multi-locations and communication is difficult, that's where it's difficult. But if you're a small employer, I'll defer to everybody else, but my gut tells me that you sit and you have a conversation. You have that honest conversation to see how people are feeling about how things are going on, not just at work, but how things are going on in their community.
What if you don't have an existing, and I think there's already, even in this question, there are probably holes I would poke in this question in terms of its validity, but what if you feel like you don't have an existing diverse workforce, and so you're starting out with, let's use Jermaine's example, all of your employees are 45-year-old white men. And how do you have a diversity conversation with that group?
I just had this happen with a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, asking about the desire to have a more diverse board for some of the boards that she is currently serving on. And so same type of a scenario, really hard. And what my suggestion would be is to partner up with some of the community groups, the multicultural groups or veterans groups, senior groups, whatever it is that you're looking to have, and talk with them, talk it up. What is your target and who do you know? And then start your networking within these different groups so that you can begin to bring in that diverse workforce.
Yeah, I agree. I think also look beyond the walls of your organization, right? So you're seeing a lot of corporations move to what is considered supplier diversity. So their partners that they work with, is there an opportunity to be diverse there? How about the, some of the other companies that you may be partnering with? There are opportunities there. There are companies that are women-owned, minority-owned that you can partner with that can help expand while you're figuring out how to make your internal operations a bit more diverse. There are things you can do today to diversify the experience of all the employees within your company now.
That's a really great point. I don't think that's one that's necessarily jumps out as an obvious thing in terms of supplier diversity. I know that here at New Hampshire Business Review and New Hampshire Magazine and Parenting New Hampshire, New Hampshire Home, there, I'm just going to list all our products. I'll list all our events too. But anyway, I know that throughout this national conversation, we've had a lot of conversations internally. I think that our editors have always made an effort to cover as much of the population here in New Hampshire as they could. But diversity is an issue that's often, I think, been a challenge when you have such a non-diverse population. So yeah. And I think that even with having approached it with really good and forward-thinking intentions, I think they're still finding new ways to up that game, and part of that just comes out of having those conversations.
I agree. If I could just address, we touched on leadership a little bit, and I think that this feels different than the past. This is really for the leaders out there that are running organizations, that are leading their HR group. I don't think this is going away. This is not the time just to sit back. I'm going to wait for this to blow over, and then we're going to get back to business as usual. This is a shift, almost how COVID has shifted things, and for the future looks totally different. I think this is here to stay. It feels different. The conversations are different. The terms we're using are very different. And this is where leaders really need to step up and meet this need, be the leaders that your companies really want and need you to be during this time. And so a little bit of attention can go a long way, I think, here. This is obviously not easy work. It's hard work. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I don't know if we'll ever feel like it. We've made it. We've done it. But I would say it is work, obviously worth doing, and it really isn't going to go away. And I'm seeing a lot of staff and employees. It's really the groundswell of this movement, as a whole. But I think the leaders they really need to get ahead of this, right? They don't want to be left behind as their whole organization has their eyes on this issue, and you don't. So this is something I wanted to mention as we talked about leadership's role. I think leadership has a big role to play here, and any change that's going to last has to be with the involvement and vision of strong leaders within your organization. Because I do believe leaders drive your culture as well. So I just wanted to mention that, just about the leader's role in all of this work.
So to take that one step further, what would your, let's say you're talking to a leader who wants that practical, actionable, all right, tell me what to do. What are the first three things that I can do as a leader in an organization that are practical, tangible things? Yeah. Should I have a survey? Should I give a speech? What do I do?
Join the DWC. That's number one. Very easy thing to do. short money. It's way more resources there and way more value than it actually costs. So do that. I think that's a great place to start. Educate yourself. I think this is a great. There's so much out there, and there's so much that we can do. And there isn't a template that, even as a consultant, I don't come in and say, this is what you do to improve diversity and inclusion within your organization, because each organization has their own challenges, unique challenges and cultures and people and issues that they're working within, budget parameters, all those things come into play. But I think it starts with being a champion yourself, educate yourself, understand why this work is important, and have a vision for this type of work, and then include your employees to help you figure out, how do we get from our point A to this inspiring point B, right? And we're going to make this case, we're going to communicate this over and over again, so our employees get it. We're going to make this a part of the DNA of our company. This is who we are. This is our culture, because this is culture work that we're talking about here. It's not a check off the box activity. Not if you want it to sustain. So I think it starts there with having bringing some self-awareness to, your own practice as a leader, understanding some of these issues, just putting in the work, and then relying on the smart people that you've hired, and even some external people to come in and help you along the way. I don't know if that. What do you think? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think that's there. I can tick those off. 1, 2, 3. Join DWC. Educate yourself to the degree that you've developed an actual vision, which is a helpful thing for a leader to have, and then include the employees in the execution of that vision.
I would throw one more thing into that. I think that we need to focus on equality-based metrics for success, and then if we focus on that, then the economic success of an organization and the quality of an organization will come in. And I think that's like what Jermaine said, this is here to stay. And we need to make that shift. And if we start to look for those organizations that really like to have the numbers, start there. Take a look at your own organization and focus on where there may be inequality within the organization, and then start your plan of how you're going to make a difference.
Tina,
that's a great point.
I think anything worth, anything that we do, most of our metrics that we take in organizations, we measure, right? We measure revenue, we measure hiring, we measure retention, we measure our budget, right? Discipline, and these are things that we can begin to measure, and measuring it brings some accountability as well. So I love the point that you're making, Tina, and I 100% agree.
So two quick things. One, we do have a question, a couple questions from the audience. One we'll go through really quickly. That was, what is DWC? That is the acronym for Diversity Workforce Coalition, and who is our presenting sponsor for this webinar, and with whom Jermaine works. And anyway, so Jermaine, you gave a little bit on Diversity Workforce Coalition in the beginning, but did you want to?
Yeah, that was a shameless plug, but it is a member-based community of employers. It really is an opportunity to network and be exposed to different resources, educational programs as well. Throughout the month, we've been having weekly hour-long sessions for folks as well to learn about unconscious bias and measuring diversity. So it's a resource for you to be exposed to those types of training and education opportunities as well. And there's also a conduit to other external resources that may help you along in your diversity and inclusion journey.
And more broadly, I think that you could even take that point number one, which was join DWC, and if you were someplace else in the world and that wasn't available to you, or a sensible opportunity, you could read that as don't do this in a vacuum, right?
Yeah, I agree.
To other organizations and be able to get those other perspectives. One other thing, Tina, that you had mentioned, you were talking about metrics, and we have a couple questions around that. One is, we have a question, can you provide guidance on how to collect race/ethnicity of applicants help the organization assess its recruitment efforts? I know this is a touchy subject, but I'd like to see my organization set a benchmark and aim for X% racially diverse applicants before the hiring committee can begin reviewing an individual's applications. The race data could be collected separately from their application so that once the application review begins, there is no way to tie race to the applicant and therefore no opportunity for discrimination. So, Tina, do you guys do you have a thought on how they can tackle that challenge?
That is tough. It's kind of as tough up there as trying to identify if someone has a disability that you feel that you can work with, that protected information. Maybe where I would focus more on is when you're looking at your recruitment materials, it's like start at the beginning. Make sure that your recruitment materials show a diverse workforce or the desire to have a diverse workforce. If you're fortunate enough to have current staff members that are diverse and willing to speak about it, use their testimonials of why they work for your organization. And then, target your advertising. You can, if you're looking to attract seniors, maybe consider AARP as where you're going to try to do some targeted advertising. That's an interesting question that you ask. We gather that type of information once an offer has been made, but not before an offer is made. So I'm really not sure. Maybe Elizabeth, you have any ideas?
I kind of feel the same way. I get nervous about asking for that information up front just to play devil's advocate. Then if they aren't meeting your diverse requirements, are you unbiasedly prejudiced against them because they aren't moving you in that direction? So I get it's from like an ADA perspective, you want to make sure that you don't have that, you're not using that information to make your decision. So it's something that we track once candidates are brought on board. But not something that we're kind of looking at ahead of time. To Tina's point, you can direct our internal referrals. We've definitely grown that program to tap into those networks. And for our production team specifically, it's a pretty diverse workforce just from the nature of the work. So we've been able to tap into that and expand from that perspective. If you work with any agencies or just any general recruiting, where are you targeting? What specific locations are you targeting? Any schooling or anything from that perspective? I think you can tailor it from that as opposed to just gathering that information ahead of time.
Right. I think it would be, it would be very obviously you don't get a resume and it doesn't look like a Dungeons and Dragons character profile that lists your race and your belief system and
It
all the
sounds
spells
so
you can cast.
sticky from an HR perspective. I don't like that one.
Me neither.
So I think that what that does mean though is that you have to have a large enough pool of applicants that is diverse enough so that just based on the odds, you're going to have qualified candidates. So how, and we touched on this a little bit in the call that we had yesterday, how do you get that pool of candidates if you're in a state like New Hampshire that is largely white, you know, you may go a big portion of your career as a hiring manager without getting applications from, or at least that you would know, or having interviews with people of color or people of different ethnicities in general. You know, so how do you expand that pool if they're just, resumes aren't coming in?
I'd like to jump on that one. We did a program here at Easter Seals. We called it our New Americans program, but we specifically worked with Welcoming Manchester, which was a group, and another organization that works specifically with immigrants and refugees. And we went to them and said, we hear that one of the struggles is employment for immigrants and refugees, and English is another potential barrier to employment. Well, we want to work with you and we want to figure out how to make this work. We need employees. You need to place your community into meaningful employment that has the potential not to just be entry level, but has some career growth opportunities. And so we did that. We went out and we ran two over a period of about a year and a half, 2 different sessions, and hired over 20 individuals, most of whom are still with us today. And we designed a program to do vocational education with an English spin so that the individuals that came into our program learned about our organization, our culture, the individuals that we serve, and we're able to also learn how to have conversation with individual, in this case, children. So you can go out, and I know that there's other organizations that I'm aware of that have targeted specific groups of individuals and said, let's talk, you know, what are the barriers? How do we break them down? And let's put a program in place. And then you have to sustain it. I mean, it's all wonderful and good if you do that once, but you have to be able to sustain it. So like for us, we're still running our English language classes, and we open it up for anybody in the organization.
Yeah, and if I can add, I agree. I think you cast the wider net. There are organizations that you can partner with that target certain individuals to get into your process. I think one of the few silver linings in this whole COVID pandemic is this idea of virtual workspaces, right? So companies who didn't think some of this work can be done from home, they're learning that it can be done from home. So that opens up pretty much the whole world, right? So we can't, no longer can we say, oh, that there's not enough in my community. No, we can hire from just about any place in this country. So if there are those opportunities that you feel can be done virtually, I think it's a great opportunity for you to expand your net in that way. And I also think we can't overlook our internal workforce. So I work with a lot of companies. There seems to be this line, right? So they're diverse, but their diversity population is in the production and manufacturing floor, right? But their corporate is not very diverse. So somehow we got to blur that line and figure out how we can get folks from here to there, right? And just grow our internal talent pool, because there's some very talented, very smart people that may be working at a certain area of your business, and you're just overlooking them when it comes to entry-level roles within the corporate space, or how do you support their growth within the company. So I would say if you can start there too. Like there are some internal folks that you can support and grow into some of the other roles within your organizations. And that may even take a bit of helping them see that there are bigger opportunities, outside of supervisor, right, for your line. Like, let's figure out how we can get you to think about, what's after that or what could be next for you. So tap that workforce as well, because that's full of brilliant people there.
That seems like a real, a real benefit to the company too, in terms of not, in terms of creating that sense that promotion opportunities do exist inside, and and it seems like training must be a big part of that as well,
Yeah.
providing training opportunities or personal growth and development opportunities for the whole staff.
You got it.
You had also mentioned, Jermaine, that another potential thing that companies could think about to bolster the number of resumes they get from diverse populations is thinking about partnering with colleges. So if you have a traditionally Black college, making sure that you're on their guidance counselors, list of employers.
Yes, 100%. And by the way, we live in a beautiful part of this country. People are interested in coming here, by the way, and we may even have some biases as about attracting, diverse candidates to this area. But who wouldn't love this area? This is a beautiful part. Let's take advantage of this. So whatever biases you may have about, can I really get people here? Yes, you can. They would love to be here if the opportunity presented itself to be able to settle down in this particular area. But yeah, I would say target those historically Black colleges and universities, the all women universities, that the remaining that are out there. Target some recruiting there as well. That's another way that you can kind of widen and broaden your net there and and also be focused at the same time.
I have a couple more things here from the audience. One, if somebody is curious about how you join DWF, that is diversityworkforce.org/membership. Thank you, Karen. We had a question, actually a stat here from Kira, who says, I recently learned that New Hampshire is 93% white and most of the people of color living here are under the age of 18. This came from a Stay Work Play webinar on Black Lives Matter. And the listener says NH as a whole needs to do more to create a welcoming and inclusive culture. So
I agree. And that inclusivity is very important because some of the challenges that we're seeing, by the way, across the country, we're not immune to. It doesn't take long to hear stories of friends or folks, particularly people of color, the few that we have, they're exposed to some of the same racism and prejudices and that some other folks are around the country. So one, we got to get out of this mindset that it doesn't happen here and that we're immune to it, that somehow we're special. We're not. People are people. And we face very similar challenges, although they may not be as prevalent or as visible as some other places, but they are here. So creating an environment where all people, so I guess my point is, even here, we have to be very intentional about this stuff. It just doesn't happen naturally.
Yeah. I have a question here. We run a grant-funded, tuition-free soft skills course to prepare people for the workplace. We have included a workplace sensitivity unit for years, but it is outdated and we're looking for a new curriculum to share with our participants. Any recommendations for resources? So I guess your favorite workplace sensitivity training curriculum.
I don't think I have one. I don't know if Liz or Tina, if you have one.
Yeah, I know. Yes, I can. We have someone here at Easter Seals. Her name is Gloria Fulmer, and she does a workplace sensitivity training. And then the state also offers sensitivity training. I can get that to you. I just don't have it right at my fingertips right here. Is there a way to do that, Ernesto?
Yes, why don't we can put that, if you want to type that into the chat and choose for that to go to the entire audience. Then everybody will be able to see the item.
Perfect.
And actually, I will do the same thing with the link to diversity workforce membership, just in case folks want that, if I can. So, oh, shoot. Hey, are you guys still there?
Yep, when we can see you.
I'm probably frozen with a silly expression on my face, right?
No,
You're
you're
good.
fine.
Oh, okay. Well, my screen is frozen, so
Okay.
I am going to keep going, but I am now flying blind.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you can still hear and see me. Going on, I did want to ask Elizabeth, as we're talking about how to get those resumes in, you guys are doing specific referral programs to help in that recruiting effort. And can you talk a little bit about the details of those? Are you doing, are you creating incentives for people who are able to bring in friends or folks they know?
Yeah, so we've done it overall from a whole company perspective, kind of revamped the program because it's our operations team right now that has needed the most support, but people outside of that team know someone that can fill a role like that. So we've opened it up pretty broadly. I think incentivizing people is a pretty sure way to see that you'll get results. So we have tailored it to all of our operations team, production, warehouse, those kind of roles. We start from a temp perspective. So we bring them on through a temp agency with the hopes of transitioning them to perm. So it used to be that not until someone went perm, they were eligible for that referral bonus. And now we've transitioned it to they can still be a temp employee. So if you refer someone and we bring them on and they are here for 30 days and in good standing, then the employee receives a $250 bonus payout. And then in addition to that, your name gets put in a hat for a $1,000 drawing as well. So kind of 2 touch points. And that definitely encouraged people to somehow someone knew everyone. So we definitely saw more resumes or just names and numbers. It was even just, here's a scrap paper with my friend, they're looking for work. So, and then we kind of took it from there in the HR team. So it was cool to see that come together. And it's cool to build that pipeline too, even if you don't need hires at that moment. It's cool to be like, okay, we have this pool, we can tap into it should we need to expand the workforce again too. So we definitely saw a lot of interest from that. And we saw people not even in those teams send us names. So it was definitely cool to see our teams come together, and everyone knows someone. You just have to remind them that they know someone.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and we're getting very near the end of our time. Probably we're at it. But if you guys have a second, I just have one more topic I wanted to touch on, and then of course also to be able to thank you and let you guys wrap up with a closing statement as well. Do you have another minute?
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. So the related to what you were just talking about, Elizabeth, I think that falls under the category of leveraging the internal diversity you already have at your company. But I think one of the challenges there is to make sure that that's done in a sensitive way, that doesn't put somebody on the spot, to be an advocate for your company giving testimonials about diversity when really they came on because they wanted to do whatever the job was that they were hired for. So I'm wondering what you guys think of that, how you can avoid that and have it be a, sort of a mutually beneficial experience.
We've kind of seen that from a different diverse perspective, kind of to step away from race for a minute. Where I've seen it go is that we have seen more transgender employees join our teams. And I think that the first piece is to have conversations with them first. What role do you want to play in this? Are you comfortable with us having you as a touch point and just kind of using you as an advocate? And you kind of let them dictate how they want to be in the conversation. So we've had diversity and inclusion roundtables where we've talked about transgender in the workplace, and we've invited those employees, but haven't put that pressure, so to speak, on them to say, you're leading this conversation. We just want you there to participate and have more insight into that day to day, but we don't expect you to lead this conversation. I think by having that approach at first, that same employee has come to me privately and say, hey, I'm comfortable with you sharing my name if anyone wants this support. So it kind of naturally grew, but you can't force someone to do that. So you really need to get their buy-in. Like we've been talking about this whole time, we need employees' feedback. We need that team feedback to be able to drive and really have a path to go forward.
I totally agree with you, Elizabeth. I don't think it makes any sense to force somebody to be the mentor or their leader to stand up. I do think that it is worthy of a conversation. We had an individual who started with us who happened to be of color and a refugee, been with us for quite a while and worked his way up from a direct support professional all the way into an upper management position, utilizing the benefits that we offer as an organization. And when we were looking to recruit with the immigrant and refugee communities, we asked him if he would be willing to share his story on where he has come from and how he ended up where he is today. And he was very willing to do that. And it was very powerful to hear him. But if he had said no, we wouldn't have pursued that any further.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Jermaine, last thoughts?
On as a whole, Ernesto, or on this topic?
Either on this topic or as a whole, because
Okay.
we'll wrap this topic up and then we'll begin to wrap up overall.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think some of your employees, they're not interested in this work, and we don't want to put undue burden on them. So I think Elizabeth and Tina are right on having these conversations, asking them what part they want to play. I think is very, very important. They shouldn't be your default or de facto resource with some of these issues. And it can actually build resentment because they're going to look at you and ask you to educate yourself. And if you don't want to put your education, you don't want to make your education somebody else's responsibility, right? So, and it's a tough position for an employee to be in, particularly if it's coming from leadership. So I think having that conversation, being sensitive, I think is very, very important. I'm with you guys.
All right. Well, we are at the end of time, so I guess let's just go quickly down the line and maybe for some closing thoughts, starting with Tina.
Well, again, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciated the invitation. I love the fact that these types of conversations are occurring. They need to continue to occur, and I would encourage everybody to have those conversations.
Jermaine.
I agree. It's such a pleasure to be here. Happy to be a part of this discussion, just hearing the different perspective and viewpoints. And I just want to encourage all of those on the line to start by starting. This isn't easy work, and you're not going to have this perfect plan before you just start doing this work. So start by starting. Start by having that meeting, having that discussion with leadership, getting alignment around some of these things, having a conversation with your employees, bringing in that initial training just to start, starting that diversity inclusion council or roundtable. Start by starting, and I think know you're going to stumble. You're not going to get it right the first time. That's quite all right. But I think what your employees want is to see some intentional around this work, and don't hesitate to leverage external support if you need it.
Start by starting. Never truer words spoken.
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was really helpful to, I think, for me to just share what Vapotherm's doing and to hear other people's feedback. I think that that's how we continue this process and to grow and to educate, is to hear from each other. So that was really helpful. I think what we learned or talked about a lot today was this should be a part of a culture. This isn't kind of a fix it now type of thing. As Jermaine stressed on, I don't think this is going anywhere. It's kind of been there, but with everything going on now, it's just come more to light and more actively talked about. So I would encourage anyone that's kind of on the fence to do this as an overall thing, not just as a right now, but this should be a shift that we all have going forward, and kind of help define our cultures from here on out.
Thank you so much. That's Elizabeth Chick, HR Coordinator at Vapor Therm Incorporated, Tina Sharby, Chief Human Resources Officer at Easter Seals, and Jermaine Moore, founder of the Mars Hill Group. You guys are wonderful. I learned so much from talking to you today, and I thank also our listeners. I hope that you guys also got the same degree of value I felt like I did out of listening to what these guys had to say. I also want to thank, on behalf of New Hampshire Business Review, our sponsors today, the Diversity Workforce Coalition, our presenting sponsor, and Sulloway and Hollis PLLC, our supporting sponsor. Thank you for making this possible, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Vanessa.